This is Martin Giles of the Guildford Dragon News, and today I'm with Joss Bigmore, leader of Guildford Borough Council, and Paul Follows, leader of Waverley Borough Council. Gentlemen, welcome to the Guildford Dragon. Thank you for giving your time again.
No problem. Good morning, Martin.
And I've requested the interview so we can catch up on what's happening about the joint initiative for more shared services. And so, Joss, if I can start with you, can you give a progress report since I last interviewed you both several months ago?
Sure. So Tom Horwood was appointed Joint Chief Executive formally at the end of November. He started December the 2nd in a Joint Chief Executive role. We were sorry to see James Whiteman not apply for the role. So Tom has been in post for nearly 2 months. In that period, he's obviously been meeting all of the new staff and the ways of working in Guildford, and his assessment of the two authorities, and starting his assessment of the staff. The councillors have been working on the inter-authority agreement that will govern a legal form to the collaboration. We actually have a meeting directly after this one. So the working group is 3 councillors from each council. Myself and Paul, George Potter from the Liberal Democrats in Guildford, and Jan Harwood from the Conservatives. And we have Stephen Mulliner, the leader of the Conservatives at Waverley, and a representative, Peter, I'm sorry, Paul, I can't remember his surname, from the Farnham Residents.
Peter Marriott, yeah.
Peter Marriott, I apologise. So we're going through the various aspects of the inter-authority agreement. It's quite technical work, finance, what happens if we want to break and exit this arrangement, risk, governance, HR. So each individual aspect that will govern put the guidelines in place, that will be brought back to both councils to approve late spring. I'm hopeful of getting it done in the spring. And then once that's in place, in parallel, we're starting to work on how the next tier down of management will work.
I'm going to ask Paul about the next steps, but are you satisfied, Joss, with the progress to date?
I think it's been really good. I think we have a lot of momentum. I mean, it's been, for local government, very fast. And I think that shows the will of both councils to really push this work. So, things normally take a long while in local government. This is happening very quickly, and I think we're keeping momentum. So we're meeting weekly with the inter-authority agreement, 2-hour sessions. It's got a, and I know that there is skepticism from the Conservatives, especially who didn't support the agreement, but I have to thank them for their contribution. They're being very constructive and aiding the process. So,
okay.
I'm hopeful that we will get more support as we move through this process.
Thank you. And so over to you, Paul. Now, what further progress should we see over the next year?
Okay, well, so when both councils discussed this last time, they agreed 3 things, one of which has happened, as Joss has mentioned, which is the appointment of the Joint Chief Executive. The second thing that the Joint Chief Executive was empowered to do was to create that joint single management team, so the group directly below him. That is what he is cracking on with at the moment, and the organisational design that goes around that. Guildford and Waverley have slightly different organisational structures, so it's finding something that works for both councils. So that's the main thing that he's doing. And actually, when we get to savings, that's where the next tranche of savings probably will be realised in that joint senior management team. The third thing, as Joss has already alluded to, is the inter-authority agreement, and that covers everything from HR to finance to governance to all of it. So those are the 3 things at the moment that both councils have got authority to pursue. And the next thing that has to happen is that the inter-authority agreement, when it's finished, has to come back to council for approval. But what we're not doing is ignoring any opportunities that come up as we go. So if there is anybody who leaves the authority, we're looking at if there's a joint replacement that would be better. If there are business cases that already make sense for us to pursue, for example, just this week we met to discuss whether there's any synergy on our climate change teams that we might want to pursue straight away. So if there are areas that make sense to crack on with, we're doing that. But the 3 things that have been established so far by council is what we're progressing on.
Okay, now to both of you, we'll continue with you for the minute. Do you think real savings have already been made? And do you think all the identified savings will be realised? Because in my experience working in government, this can be very difficult. It's with shared services. People often think it must be right that if we share services, we will make savings. But sometimes when it comes to it, it's not as easy as we might like it to be.
Yeah, I mean, often you see this in the private sector too. Sometimes when you've made savings, it's because they're not the same service. They cost less for a damn good reason. And actually, one of the things we need to make sure that we do is make sure it is at least the same service or better if we're reducing the cost of it across the authorities and leveraging the scale rather than just making efficiencies, which I think are two very different things. So at the moment, the councils, just through the Joint Chief Executive project, have made £150,000 worth of budget savings across the two authorities. With the changes that are proposed to the senior management team, it's likely that we'd have somewhere in the order of 700,000 recurring budget savings across each council's medium-term financial plan. Base it on Waverley's last year and our current medium-term financial plan, where we have achieved all of the identified savings that we've had in our financial plan. I see no reason why we won't achieve the forecast that we've got here. Our officers are very good at this and have hit every single marker that we've asked them to hit locally, as it's the same officers with Guildford officers working on the collaboration, I don't see why we won't achieve those two.
Okay, Joss, those £150,000 savings, where have they come from?
The Joint Chief Executive.
Okay, so
we now have one chief executive who's on £150,000 salary, which is a spot salary. Actually, I think all in, that's less than we were paying James Whiteman when he left in terms of his salary plus packages. So that's a headline saving. I think there are also, I mean, Paul mentioned climate change. So obviously you reported yesterday about the disparity in the perceived quality of the climate change action plan between Waverley and Guildford Borough Council. Well, there is a prime area where we need to learn from Waverley. And get better, and that's a way we can level up between Waverley and Guildford in climate change, and I think that's really exciting. It was a very positive meeting, and really make sure that Guildford and Waverley are both greater than 76% in next year's assessment of climate change. So there's already work going on. Now that's not a quantifiable cost, but that is a definite benefit to the residents of Guildford, us learning from Waverley's success in that area.
And these savings, is there any independence in the way they're being measured?
The Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and this is an area of governance where we're yet to decide whether we're going to have a joint scrutiny between the two authorities or use the existing scrutiny function. So, Councillor Spooner, as chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, I'm sure will be keeping a close eye on scrutinising whether we are achieving what we are achieving, and as is his role, as he should be doing on behalf of the residents of the boroughs.
Okay, back to you, Paul. Do you think that the residents in Waverley are happy with this initiative? Have you done any polling?
So we've done a little bit of canvassing. I mean, we do this continuously throughout the year, and sort of in the nearly post-pandemic situation we're in now, it's a little bit more safe and sensible to do that. And we do some other types of surveying too. And like Joss, I get a lot of letters from people, some good, some bad. And I think there's a few things. Firstly, residents obviously want to make sure the services stay at least the same. And that's been made very clear throughout. But actually, I haven't had a single letter from any resident that said, we don't like what you're trying to do here, because ultimately they're starting to realize two things. One is the government aren't going to give us any more money. And to be quite honest, the very few people that think that that was ever going to happen should just read the Levelling Up white paper, and they'll see that we're not going to. And secondly, they need to make sure that they want that services remain the same or better. And what they're seeing is, firstly, we're cracking on with it. It's not just been talking about it, but actually that we're starting to make real savings already. What they will be waiting to see next is that services aren't impacted as a result of that. And I think that's the area that we need to be focusing on. I think the savings component, I actually think that's pretty sound and pretty solid and very deliverable. The bit that will always concern me is that we're making sure that we deliver services to at least equal standard. And that is the bit really, I think, that should be getting more focus. I mean, the scrutiny committees will look at the numbers, and I'm sure they'll come up to the same things as us that say that we're hitting those numbers. Really, the useful thing for everybody would be validation that the services are staying the same, and that's where I'm focusing my time and attention, Martin.
Okay, you agree, Joss? The same picture in Guildford?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think residents care that they're getting value for money from their council tax. and they're getting the same, if not better, services year on year. What we are doing behind the scenes to achieve that, to be frank, I don't think they really care about, as long as the services are resilient, which, you know, and professionally run. So I think the proof will be in the pudding. But we don't have a choice, Martin. If we want to continue the service, providing the service that we currently provide, we have to find ways to be more efficient, and that, so we don't have a choice. So it is, if it would be, you know, it would be remiss of us not to try and do this to protect the service, because as Paul said, we're not getting help from outside anywhere, and that's, so we're taking destiny into our own hands.
And have you had any letters?
I've only had letters of support.
Okay.
I haven't had a single resident say I don't like what you're doing. There's a few questions around the democratic separation of the two councils. Are we going to merge councillors? And we've said absolutely not. That will only happen if the two council chambers want to do it. We have no authority to do it. We've never said we're going to do it. There is no plan to do it. That will come, you know, years down the line if two chambers that probably me and Paul aren't in decide that that's a step they want to take. But at the moment, there is no plan to do that. Okay,
well, that's a nice segue to my next question, which is, do you think this partnership between the two councils puts both of them in a good position to merge as a unitary authority should a proposal re-emerge? And I know you've just said that's not likely in the near future, but you know, it's bubbling away, isn't it? The unitary authority issue.
I think that the direction of travel from central government is they want less and bigger local authorities. That's that, and the kind of the less they are, the more they'll devolve to you. I think Guildford and Waverley together is 300,000 people, probably getting on for a couple of billion in assets, you know, significant turnover. We are powerful together. Positive contributions to the Treasury, I'm sure. So we are a louder voice together, and I'm sure. I think 500,000 is the population kind of limit for joining that the government's talking about. So we may need another partner, but at the moment, you know, we are working together for our residents to have a louder voice in those discussions should they happen. And I would rather be defining what happens to us rather than be told what's going to happen to us.
Are council officers working on those ideas?
Not in Guildford.
Oh, okay, right, Paul. Then same question to you. What do you think about, you know, the prospect of unitary authorities and how and when it might re-emerge?
Well, I think the immediate prospect of it happening has diminished purely because the white paper refers to areas where they're kicking that process off or have kicked it off, and Surrey isn't one of them. And I also think that the moment that the Secretary of State for Local Government and Levelling Up and all the rest of it that it's called these days, being Michael Gove, a Surrey MP, also diminished that possibility of that happening. And between the two, I think that's probably kicked the can down the road on unitaries for a little while. What I would say is that if we have got time, I mean, the arguments, as Josh said, the argument of this is not going away, is it? I mean, they will look to make efficiencies, as they call it, by seeking to abolish various levels of local government that generally don't get on with what they're talking about. So I think we need to use the time to, I don't think it's exploring with partners who we might work with or any of those official things. What we have to do is prove through our actions that actually working together is viable financially and makes sense in terms of services, and we do that by just delivering on what we've said with this partnership. I think if we do that, we're going to have people chomping at our door to be a part of this and to work with us, and there are boroughs in the immediate area that I think would benefit from some collaboration work, but we've got to prove it works first, and that it makes sense, and that we're doing everything that we've said. So I don't think there'll be anything formal, but I think they'll see what we're doing and they will come to us.
Okay, now I can't resist letting you go without just asking your views on the national situation.
Right.
If you could answer concisely, please, because we are 20 minutes in now, but what is your view of the national situation? And importantly, what impact is it having on you as leaders of local authorities? Paul, if we start with you.
Yeah, okay, there's a couple of things on this. I mean, I wrote a letter to the MP for South West Surrey, Jeremy Hunt, about this, about the Partygate. I mean, I've had my parents live in Guildford, and both had COVID at the same time and went into hospital. And during the pandemic, I wasn't able to go see them even at the Royal Surrey because the rules were such as it is. And my opinion as a elected person and as leader of a council, it's our duty to be absolutely whiter than white when it comes to those sorts of rules and making sure that people understand what those rules are and that they should follow them. So irrelevant of any party politics, I've found some of what's been going on particularly offensive. And I've said so. If we go back into how it impacts us as councils, well, firstly, and I imagine Joss is of the same view, we all get painted with politicians being liars and deceptive and so on, and that bleeds down to us, and I'm sure Joss will say more on that. But I think the thing that's bothering me most is the stuff that's been happening this week, is that in order to deflect from those things, we're having this mass just spoffing of policies thrown out at the last minute, which in some cases impact local government that we're having to deal with. So, for example, the national insurance rise, there was some possibility that might go or might not in the last 10 days, and to the point that I had to ask our finance officer to think about what the impact would be. We've got cost of living rises impacting everything left, right and centre, which there's some support on or not, or to some parts of the population or not. We'll maybe codify that in the next few days if we get round to it. And the levelling up paper looks like somebody finished it in 5 minutes because they needed to get it out the door to deflect from some bad press. I mean, it doesn't look done, it doesn't look finished. So, I mean, we end up having to deal with those kind of operational problems at the other end. But as you say, I found the whole thing offensive before we even get into council work, and probably best I stop there, Martin, otherwise I'll go on forever.
Thanks, Paul. And Joss?
Yeah, I mean, I don't normally like dipping my toe in national politics, as you know, Martin, being a resident group, but I think Boris Johnson needs to realise, and the people that enable him in government need to realise, the damage he is doing to politics as a whole. The impact of his behaviour, and whether it's incompetence or he doesn't care or whatever, the relationship between me, my councillors, and that's councillors of all parties, and the council officers and the public is being damaged severely. The kind of hostility in emails, the tone of email is getting worse and worse, and it is down to the example set at the top, and the top is the Prime Minister. That is the most important leadership role in this country, and he is demeaning that office, and that is impacting on my ability to lead this borough. Like Paul, I feel I have to set an example to the whole borough in my behaviour wherever I am, whether it's wearing a mask in Starbucks this morning when no one else is, or this, and he does not set that example, and that makes my job and every councillor's job so much harder. We're having to make difficult decisions, you know, even Arno funding, public toilets, parking increases. You know, I get emails asking me where the brown envelope's coming from, where's this, where's that, because there is no trust. And it is his role and the Conservatives' role as leading this country to rebuild that trust with the public, and they can't do it with him there. So I'm with David Davis, for God's sake, man, go. And I don't say that lightly. I voted for Angela Richardson. I don't mind admitting it, but I would not again while he's in charge, because it's not just the politicians, the council officers, wonderful people working very hard, and they do not deserve to be tarred with the same brush as those people in number 10. And it's appalling, Martin. I'm sorry, I probably overstepped the mark, but it's disgusting.
No, it's good to get a genuine, heartfelt view. Gentlemen, thank you both very much for giving your time to the interview, and I hope we can interview you both again in a few months' time to check how things are going.
Pleasure as always, Martin. Thank you.
Cheers, Martin.